All right, so this is the April presentation for the Tabletop Minions meeting, and tonight we're going to talk about scenarios in miniatures games. A lot of people will get together, especially when they're first starting out, to learn a game, and they've got one force versus another force, and they just try to go and eliminate each other, and you get to the end of that, and whichever team destroys the other team is the winner. Well, once you get bored with that, a lot of times what happens is that people want to try to find some other scenarios. The scenarios will give the players the something more to do than just line up and eliminate each other. Some games are all about that. A lot of historical games are about big gun lines facing across from a field, because that's the way it was originally done, so that's fine. But for more skirmish games or things like that, you want to have some sort of scenario so it's not just the same thing over and over again. Scenarios can be strung together over a period of days, or even if you just want to play all day long or whatever, and they can be strung together into a campaign. If you string them over into a campaign, you have to sometimes concern yourself with, a lot of times in a campaign situation, the team that wins will then get to get some bonus, which then leads into the next, the next tussle. Sometimes if you lose guys in this particular fight, they're not going to be around for the next fight, things like that. The downside is that sometimes that can really turn the tide and then make it very difficult for someone to kind of come back and start to win the campaign. You lose the first couple and it's kind of all over, which is realistic, but scenarios can also be, they can be very quick and simple, or they can be detailed, and varied. Win conditions can be very binary. You either are winning or you're losing. Did you do the thing or did you not do the thing? Or they can be points based. You can say, okay, well, if you get this many points, it's a major victory. If you get this many points, maybe it's a minor victory. Or if you do this thing, it's a draw. It's totally up to the person kind of writing the scenario. You always want both sides to agree on what the scenario, what the rules are, so that everybody's on the same page. Some scenarios can have primary, secondary, and even tertiary objectives where maybe, okay, well, you've got to be able to take this thing and hold it, but then over here there's this thing and you get more points if you hold this, or if you get more points if you get more people into here, or if this guy on this side dies, that kind of thing. There's a lot of different things you can do. It's best to either, again, agree ahead of time and figure out what you're going to do, or what some people do. I know some certain games, like I think Warhammer 40K, a lot of times there will be a list of things in the back of the book, and then you bring your army, I bring my army, and then we roll to see what is going to happen. It's going to be this scenario or that scenario or whatever. A lot of games do that where there's a random scenario chart. That way you kind of have to build your forces to really work in a certain way so that they're very versatile. And that's the different types. That's the different reasons for using a scenario, basically. Okay, so what types of scenarios are there? There's a lot of different types of scenarios. I'm just going to talk about some examples, some of the things that we use here, some of the things that you see in some of the different books. I've kind of gone through a couple of little books that I've got and tried to sort of pull some things out to talk about, but there's a lot of other ones versus what I'm going to go over here. Pick up the target. Pick up the target is usually there's an object on the board. It might be a barrel, it might be a crate, it might be some sort of magical orb or whatever. It's some sort of thing. Maybe it's a recorder, like a black box recorder from a crashed vehicle or whatever, and both sides want it. So frequently what you need to do is you need to get it, pick it up, and bring it back to your side of the map. Sometimes you might have multiples. We've played games before where there's one in the middle, one kind of on one guy's side and one on the other guy's side. So you've got to try to get as many of them over as possible. The pick up the target and bring it back has a tendency to be binary. It has a tendency to be either you brought it back or you didn't. You either won or you lost. Controlling the zones. Sometimes you'll have a board where there's multiple zones and you need to have a certain amount of people within a certain range of these certain markers, whether it's like a like a landmark or whatever, or a hill or a flag or something like that, and you've got to have a certain number of people alive at the end of usually a prescribed time. Maybe it's 6 turns, maybe it's 8 turns, whatever. At the end of the game, how many guys do you have near the spot, or maybe you've got multiple spots. In that situation, you can then sometimes have a major victory versus a minor victory. Well, I had all my guys were on the board and they were near a spot, but they weren't near both spots. So maybe it was considered a minor victory because you completely forgot about the other one or whatever. Capture or rescue the figure. It's kind of like picking up the target, except that it's somebody who, it's an actual figure that you have to be able to then bring back to your side. The downside of that is that because it's a figure, it can be targeted by the other team. If they've decided, well, you guys are getting it and we don't want you to have it, we can try to kill that guy before he gets away. So then you've got to actually protect this other, person. Or they may move randomly, or every once in a while they might try to rabbit and take off. So you've got, a set of rules you can put into that as well. Treasure hunt. You can have specific spots on the board where you can move a figure there, roll a die, you've got a little random chart, and maybe you get a thing there, whatever it might be, an objective, or maybe you don't. So you have to keep moving from spot to spot and basically like open the box and see if it's in there or not. Sometimes in those situations, it can be a thing that you just need. It's just a MacGuffin that you need to get to score. Sometimes it could be something like a weapon. You go here, you get this thing, there it is in the box, you roll on the chart, and you get the magic sword, which now makes that guy way more powerful than he was before because he's got some new thing. That's the main difference between the kind of the treasure hunt for an objective versus the treasure hunt for an actual weapon or usable object in the game. One of the last ones is kind of an ambush situation. You roll to find out which side's going to be defender or attacker. And the defenders, it takes a little bit more work and a little bit more setup, but you get some markers. Let's say you have 2 markers for each one of the guys on your team. Really only works well in smaller kind of skirmish games. So you have 2 markers for each guy on your team, and maybe on one marker it's blank, and on the bottom of the other marker there's a number or a mark or something like that. So you've got 2 markers for every guy on your team, and you place them around the board. And when maybe if it moves within a certain distance of an enemy, or if it moves within a certain distance of a specific spot on the board, you have to flip it to see if that blip is actually just a decoy or if it's an actual person. So you're now seeing a lot more targets. If you're the, let's say, attacker, you're seeing a lot more targets than you would be normally fighting against, but you don't know. Some of them could be false positives or that kind of thing. In those situations, I mean, there's a lot more situations than that. You can look on the internet, just do a search for miniatures game scenarios or something like that, and you're going to find a lot of stuff out there. I've come across PDFs of just full of just random stuff. A lot of times they're based on how big the board is, your starting zone. A lot of that information is put in there. As long as you and the person that you're playing against both agree on which way you want to go, you can play however you want, and that it works out really well. So next time you're going to sit down and just play a game and think about and just say, well, we're just going to play and just try to see who wins by, killing the other one, maybe think up something. There's this magical fruit that you have to bring back, or whatever the deal is, something along those lines, or you have to try to hold this building at all costs, whatever. It kind of adds a little bit more interest to the game, and you might have a little bit more fun with it. So that's the presentation for April, and we will see you on the forums, and we'll talk to you next month.
It's all about the magical.
It is about the magical fruit, the magical kumquat. Ooh, I'll have to make a magical kumquat. That'll be nice.